What's up, folks? Eric Mulder here with Code Red Conversations. Thanks for joining me today. Once again, we're going to be hitting on some pretty heavy and deep topics. We're going to be primarily discussing the mass shooting in Rhode Island that took place yesterday, I believe. And after we're done talking about that, which is where we'll spend the majority of our time, we'll go on to discuss another topic. But I really want to narrow in and have a deep conversation about this epidemic we're seeing of transgender shooters. So let's just dive right in.
All right, so now to some national news. 3 people are dead, including a suspect after a shooting at a high school hockey game unfolded Monday afternoon. Emily Ikeda is in Rhode Island with more on the police investigation.
This morning, police in Rhode Island are trying to piece together what led to these chaotic moments at a high school hockey game. Video capturing the sound of gunshots at an ice rink.
We have shot.
We're going to get into a lot of detail. We're going to stop frequently as these videos progress as I share my thoughts, and I'd love to know what you think. What do you think is primarily behind the massive amount of shootings we see within the transgender community?
Shots fired, multiple people down at the Rink Arena.
Bystanders racing to safety. Police say the shooter opened fire around 2:30 Monday, killing 2 people and critically injuring 3 others.
There was one lone suspect, that this was a targeted event. It looked like it was a family dispute.
Overnight, authorities identifying the shooter as Robert Dorgan, who they say also went by Roberta Esposito. Social media posts showing Dorgan discussing getting gender reassignment surgery and recently responding to attacks on a transgender congresswoman, writing, quote, "Do not wonder why we go berserk." Police say it appears the suspect.
So you take issue with the words someone speaks, because as far as I know, if anybody has any different information out there, please let me know. But as far as I know, there haven't been any physical attacks on anyone within the trans community. People may speak their mind and may not be fans of it, but unless there's some intel that I'm not privy to, I don't know of anyone being physically attacked in that community as far as a senator anytime recently. But let's continue.
Suspect died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, adding authorities retrieved multiple firearms from the scene. They say one person tried to subdue the shooter.
A good Samaritan stepped in and interjected in this scene, and that's probably what led to a swift end of this tragic event.
The gunfire erupted in the middle of a senior night game featuring players from several local high schools, including goalie Olin Lawrence.
At first, it was like bop, bop, and I thought it was balloons, but it just kept going, and it was actually gunshots.
As chaos erupted in the stands.
Me and my teammates ran right to the locker room. We pressed against the door and just tried to stay safe down in there.
Just over 2 months after a mass shooting at Brown University killed 2 students and injured 9. Rhode Island's Governor Dan McKee saying, "Our state is grieving again."
I just never thought that something like this would happen, especially with kids involved. It's something I can't really wrap my head around.
Now, it's odd that he would say that this is something.
So what I can say right now, that we have identified the person, the suspect, by a birth name. The birth name was Robert Dorgan. We have also learned that the person does go by the name of Roberta. Also,
So it's odd that he would say that it's something he wouldn't expect. I hear that over and over again when we have situations like this where some crazed gunman decides that he wants to attack whomever, someone he believes wronged him in the past. And people typically say the same thing. They never expect it to happen where they are. And I've made many videos addressing the issue of active shootings, and you repeatedly hear the same comment. And that just reminds us as citizens to always be prepared, for a violent encounter, because you just never know where it's going to go down. oftentimes were never given a warning, even though, unless you were following him or knew him. But it's clear from some of the videos that we'll show that this wasn't a surprise as far as from the perspective of the family members. As we dig deeper in this, you're going to see that he demonstrated clear signs of aggression and violence over months and years. It caused his desire to quote unquote transition was at the heart of his divorce in 2020. And you also hear from one of his daughters who shares her thoughts. So let's jump into the next video, or the next segment that I want to share. Not segment, but I want to share an article with y'all. There we go. Hopefully that's coming up. Okay, that's good. So transgender Rhode Island maniac, and New York Post ain't playing. Robert Dorgan, who murdered ex-wife and one of their sons, had vile neo-Nazi tattoos. Now, I don't want to emphasize or focus on him having those 2 bolts tattoo. I don't want that to be the primary focus, but it can demonstrate that this guy clearly didn't have wasn't the most sound of mind. But let's read a bit of it. The transgender Rhode Island maniac who murdered his ex-wife and one of their sons at a high school hockey game had vile neo-Nazi tattoos on his bicep. Photos shown that twisted Robert Dorgan, 56, who went by the name Roberta Esposito, inked a large SS symbol on his right arm, representing the Schutzstaffel, I hope I'm saying that right, paramilitary organization during World War II. I'm going to try to refrain from saying certain terms because I don't want YouTube to flag this. I'm sure I'm already going to be facing some concerns. The symbol was frequently used in Third Reich propaganda and signage. Now, here's a picture of him. Now, when I first saw this video or first saw this image, I wasn't sure if it was legit, so I refrained from posting it. But I've seen this on multiple websites, which kind of adds to its credibility. But if I find out that it's not credible, I'll probably make another thumbnail or something like that. But it's not shocking because I've seen these most of my law enforcement career. Basically, everywhere I've worked, I've seen people with these tattoos. Some people get them when they're in prison, if they ever do any prison time. I'm not sure if he's done any prison or jail time or not. I'm not privy to that information. If you guys have anything where you know of a bit more about his history, please share it in the comments down below. I would greatly appreciate it, or in the chat if you're watching live. And here's where that insignia image comes from. In the middle of Dorgan's arm tattoo featured a bright red pseudo-runic letters appear as a white skull and crossbones with glowing red eyes, known as the Totenkopf, or Death's Head Skull. Now, this article is primarily about the tattoo. So anybody who's been around any length of time understands something about the history of that tattoo. So I don't want that to be the primary focus. I want to get more into the mindset that he demonstrated. So let's share this next section here. Let me get rid of this article. But this whole topic, I've already had my perspectives, my opinions on these things, but this whole thing seems just to be getting worse and worse as the days go on. Every time we turn around, it seems that there's another shooting by someone who claims to be trans. But I saw this article, and I've mentioned him on multiple occasions. But if you know who, if you don't, if you're unfamiliar with Andy Ngo, he is a conservative speaker. I put it in scare quotes because he's part of the LGBT community, but he's very open and honest about the issues, in particularly with the trans community. So if you're unfamiliar with him and if you're interested, follow him on X. He's an excellent resource, especially when it comes to topics like this. He often does a deep dive, and I've found his content to be very, very helpful. So let's jump into this post-millennial article. Andy Ngo reports Rhode Island trans shooter's posts show years of obsessive humiliation of his ex-wife. And here's a picture of old boy. My cis wife has flame shooting from her arms when I outdo her. And you know what, honestly, and here's a picture of him lifting weights with his fake breasts and pictures of his nails being done. I don't know I know little about this dude, but it's so sad that we are in such a time as this, where if someone is dealing with certain issues, they can be convinced, and I would largely say to some degree brainwashed into believing that they are a different gender or they're stuck in a different body. They're a male trapped in a woman's body or vice versa. And you have people from all walks of life, all types of people getting caught up in this. It wasn't that long ago where there was a former Navy SEAL who went down the whole process of transitioning. I believe he was taking hormones and things like that. I really believe that it's almost cult-like the way these people influence folks into believing there's something that they're not. And it's really it's scary, to be honest with you, because we get people like this. So let's continue. Less than a week after a transgender identifying gunman in BC, British Columbia, and Canada killed 8 women and children before turning the gun on himself, another trans shooter opened fire in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. 5 people were shot at a youth hockey. 2 were killed at a youth hockey game. Here's another picture of Robert, who was going by Roberta. He was a truck driver. So this is really wild. As with Jesse Van Rootsealer, Robert Kevin Dorgan, 56, left behind an extensive social media record that allows the public to peek into his mindset. Now, I think I'll go back and do a little research on Jesse and see what I can find out about him and see if we can put some more signals, more clues together. Just one day before the Monday shooting at the Dennis M. Lynch Arena, Dorgan responded to actor Kevin Sorbo, who had referred to Delaware U.S. Rep. Sarah McBride. And this is the reference from the video, the previous video. So this is going into a bit more detail. Rep. Sarah Tim McBride, who is transgender as a man. So, and then he goes on to say, keep bashing us, Dorgan wrote, but do not wonder why we go berserk. So again, words are enough to enrage you and motivate you to kill or lash out violently. That isn't normal, folks. It just isn't, plain and simple. And as long as we keep coddling these folks, this will continue to happen. Anyway, Dorgan did go berserk. He shot 3 of his children, his ex-wife, and 1 of their friends before killing himself. This is a coward, I believe. Coward, and you already had somebody who was clearly mentally broken, and then you stack on that all types of hormones, all types of chemicals. You have a dangerous person on your hands. His ex-wife was one of their sons were killed, according to North Providence Mayor Charles Lombardi. The other 3 were critically injured, and I pray that they're okay. And here's another photo. And I know I speak pretty harshly on this topic, but my heart truly goes out to these people because they're truly under some form of oppression, whether it's medically, whether it's psychologically, or a combination thereof, or whether it's a supernatural or demonic approach. I truly believe that there are forces that are truly influencing not only these individuals who believe they're trapped in the wrong body, but these so-called physicians and psychologists and psychiatrists who are motivating these people to head down this path. And we'll get into this video here where this comment, a video where one of the daughters talks about her father. My father was a shooter, a distraught young woman told a local television news channel as she left the station. He has mental issues. And again, we'll show a short video from Pat Bet David where he was talking about this. And this is a point that I'm going to get into after or right before I show that other video. It says right here, Dorgan's post paint a picture of a deeply unstable and contradictory figure. Now, I'm going to let y'all know I haven't went through all of these articles and videos. I've seen a few of them. So you're going to get my live reaction as we both read it. He went to great lengths to curl his hair, style it with ribbons, wear revealing women's clothes, and paint his nails pink and duck egg blue. Yet he was also a bodybuilder and a motorcycle enthusiast. He espoused far-right views and even bore a neo-Nazi tattoo, while simultaneously presenting himself as an advocate for transgender causes, frequently clapping back at conservatives on X, including this journalist. So he went after Andy Noam at one point or another. And here's another photo. I didn't know what I was looking at right here. Him flexing. And again, you look at California and some of these very progressive states that would allow this man to be housed in a prison with women. Like you're doing him a favor, or like you're doing any of them a favor. You're putting them at risk. Dorgan was a bodybuilder and suggested he was taking both testosterone and estrogen. So you're seeing a dangerous combination of chemicals and drugs that this man was taking. And I'm sure he was being prescribed this. A former Marine, Dorgan was working as a truck driver in the period leading up to the mass shooting. Dorgan's transition appeared to date back to at least 2016, if not earlier. In a pattern familiar among autogenephilic, not familiar with that term, transgender identifying men, Dorgan tried to compete with his wife, Rhonda Dorgan, over femininity, subjecting her to years of torment before she ultimately filed for divorce after he had multiple surgical procedures. It is not confirmed if Rhonda is the same deceased ex-wife described by the mayor. The deceased victims' names have not yet been released. And here's another photo of him. Wow. This is really disturbing. I don't know about y'all. Let me know what you think in the comments. I just find this really, really disturbing. In December 2016, Dorgan shared a link on then Twitter to an essay titled, "Why is my transgender wife better at being a girl than me?" Dorgan responded, "Hee, my cis wife has flame shooting from her eyes when I outdo her. What does it mean for a man to outdo being a woman to a woman?" He ended the post with emojis of high heels and a dress and a bikini. And that was right above. I showed you guys that earlier. A year later, responding to a caption challenge featuring an image of a man dumpster diving, Dorgan wrote, "When you tell your wife you're trans and she chucks the wedding band." So he was enjoying it. And here's a picture of Robert and his ex-wife Rhonda Dorgan at one of their son's graduation in 2021. Me personally, I don't know where the kid stands, but if I was ever in this situation as a kid, there's no way I'd be trying to have my dad show up thinking he's a chick. It's insane. And if the ex-wife, look at this. Look at what he's wearing. And I know that there are lawsuits going around where these young people are suing the people who do the trans procedures, these doctors and all this stuff. And there was a recent, I think it was just 2 weeks ago or so, where there was a ruling where I think it was a young girl who sought to transition like at 14. It was some young age. And she actually won and got a good hunk of change, and deservingly so. So hopefully there'll be a move away from all this nonsense. It may just be for the years where Trump's in office. Hopefully it'll be banned and outlawed in general. But at least right now, we're seeing more people moving away from it, or at least doctors really not wanting to get involved. Not to the same extent. And it may only be slightly mitigated, but heck, I'll take whatever. I'll take anything's better than nothing. By 2018, he was openly broadcasting the collapse of his marriage. He stated, "My wife says she hates the person who stole her husband," Dorgan tweeted. He also claimed he had known he was transgender since the age of 7. And this is when these crazy psychs come in there and they just make it even worse. He's 56, so like a year older than me. In 2021, Rhonda, who worked at a state mental health facility, filed for divorce. In the handwritten section listing the reason, she initially wrote gender reassignment surgery, narcissistic personality disorder traits. The statement was later crossed out and replaced with irreconcilable differences, which have caused the immediate breakdown of the marriage. It probably, I'm not sure, I think Rhode Island, isn't that where, no, I'm not sure if that's where Bernie Sanders is a senator. I forget. But I would assume that it's probably pretty progressive up there. Dorgan's social media history also contains repeated expressions of violent ideation. "All my roid rages come from testosterone, not my estrogen, oddly enough," he wrote. Like he really knows. I'm sure, well, maybe that's what the doctors told him, who knows? But I can't help but believe that it's a combination thereof. He wrote, "When I am misgendered, I politely whisper through clenched teeth, 'Honey, don't make me break a nail knocking your teeth out.'" And this whole misgendering thing, honestly, during my law enforcement career, when somebody would come into the jail, or I would be on a call dealing with someone who's professed to be transgender, this whole quote unquote misgendering thing was never even a conversation. Never. So I think that the cultural change in verbiage, or you can't quote unquote misgender someone, call them the wrong name, it just led to these people, their further spiral downward. In another post from 2018, he declared, "I could build a wall with the skulls of everyone who calls me sir." And there's it right there. Like, you want to be violent towards somebody. You yourself struggle with this for decades, and now you want to be violent towards someone who seeks to call you sir because you want to dress and act like a female. But there's nothing about you that's female. Nothing whatsoever. And this culture that appeases people like that are part of the problem. I'll read a little bit more. I think we're coming to a close here. He also boasted about alleged extramarital affairs with married men as evidence that he was more desirable than real women. I've had plenty of, he goes on to say, "I've had plenty of seemingly totally straight men married to XX females, and guess who they're cheating Guess who they're treating with? He says totally straight. And if they're messing with you, they're not. Clearly, they were just in the closet. Yeah, you better believe it. You guessed it. They're cheating with me, and nagging wives drive them nuts and suck in bed. This is mental illness is what we're seeing on display for years. With Monday's deadly shooting, Dorgan became the latest trans mass shooter in a growing phenomenon of transgender identifying killers in just the past few years. Many of them, like Nashville Christian shooter Audrey Hale and the Minneapolis church shooter Robin Westman, targeted children. Wow. I really want to know what y'all think about this. And if any of you are as bothered by this as I am, because this is just really disturbing to me. Just reading his thought process. And okay, here we go. Michelle, thank you, Michelle, for posting this in the comments. Rhode Island is represented by 2 Democrats, U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, serving since 2007, reelected in 2024, and Jack Reed. Thank you very much, because I was totally unaware. Got a lot of comments here, a few comments here. I'll jump in back and forth in there. Here's another one here. Autogenophilia is a male's sexual arousal in response to the thought or fantasy of himself as a woman. Wow. I'm learning something. Thank you, Michelle. I truly appreciate it. Ron, I couldn't agree more. And I'm so torn because there's a part of me that's naturally repulsed by this, especially the way he articulates it. He is just so over the top with his desire to be feminine. It's already hard to even watch, no doubt about it. And it's funny, when I was on patrol or when I worked in the jail, it was never an issue. I had no problems, or even when I worked in the prison, there were many gay men who tried to act female in the prison and in the jail, for instance, but more so in the prison. But there was like one dude who had breasts back in Westfield Correctional Center back in Indiana when I first started working corrections. We had one guy, and he was housed in where the cooks were. So he cooked the food for the other inmates and stuff like that. But he had to have his own cell, own spot for obvious reasons, because people would lose their dang mind. In that environment, they would lose. So he could never be completely in general population. But here's the video that I want to share with y'all. This conversation that Pat Bet David had with an individual from the Heritage Foundation. I think they were the ones where this whole Agenda 2025 was going around. And he offers a very strong and interesting take, at least from my perspective, on this whole trans issue. I think he hits the nail right on the head. I would love to know what your thoughts are as this video progresses, but I think he makes a strong case. And in light of everything we've been seeing lately, I think it'll be hard to argue against. Let me make this a little bigger. All right, let's go.
Today in Rhode Island. I'm sure you saw it. It's all over the place. And yesterday I'm finishing up. Dan, my security, says, did you just hear what happened in Rhode Island? What happened in Rhode Island? Another shooting. I said, what are you talking about? Yeah, a father, transgender father, Robert Dorgan, ID'd as RI hockey shooter who gunned down family, as sick posts are revealed. He comes in, kills 2 family members, then accidentally, they still don't know whether he killed himself or he accidentally shot himself. One article says that he accidentally shot himself. Another article said that he killed himself. And then 3.
I hadn't heard that it was accidental. What have you heard, if anything?
The others were shot and they're hospitalized. And then one of the daughters was being interviewed. Rob, do you have the interview of the daughter being interviewed? The daughter is being interviewed. I don't know if you saw this one or not. The daughter is being interviewed. And yeah, the daughter's being interviewed. And they said, what happened? And he says, my dad is, he's dealing with stuff. He's sick. Yeah,
Clearly.
That one right there, Rob. The one to the left. This is the daughter right after when it happened. Go ahead.
Shot my family, and he's dead now.
She described that shooting suspect as her father. She came out of the police department behind me here in tears after presumably being interviewed by police.
My father was a shooter.
Her father was the shooter.
What happened?
Shot my family, and he's dead now.
What was the reasoning? Was there a family argument?
He has mental health issues.
So yes.
You want to pull up this picture, Rob? You want to pull up this picture on?
Heartbreaking, honestly. It's like this is becoming so commonplace. It just really breaks my heart. Now she has to deal with that. Father basically loses it for various reasons, ends up killing her, some other family members, brother. I'm not sure what the relationship was to the stepmom or the ex-wife. I'm not sure if that was her, if she was related to her. But now she's one of the many people who has to bear the burden of dealing with this guy, with his insanity.
Who the father is, because typically, Kevin, when we hear this stuff, it's a transgender, that's the father that, is, you typically hear a young boy going through this. We've seen the stats that the shooters right now, mass shooters, number one is transgender, male to female. Number two is transgender, female to male. And we see common pattern. You're starting to see more of this happening. Do both sides agree that there needs to be something done about the mental health of these folks that these transgenders?
Both sides agree on that for people 18 and younger. In fact, it's a 80 or 80-20.
Both sides agree on that.
On that. Where there continues to be disagreement.
Did you say 85?
Yep, 85 in some polls. Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah.
And that's why there have been some really good policies, whether Trump executive orders or also state laws passed. And Heritage has been part of that. But where there continues to be disagreement is on what you do with adults. At Heritage, we believe that so-called transgender surgery is bad for anybody because of what you saw in Rhode Island yesterday. Not to be clear, not that everyone who has gone through that surgery would do that kind of thing. There does seem to be a mounting body of evidence that suggests a correlation between that surgery at any age, mental health issues, and increasingly, although we're running the numbers on this at Heritage, acts of violence. We have to come to grips with that as a society that, in a way that transcends left versus right, because this really is about the human condition. If we continue to get that wrong, then these conversations we're having about family policy and restoring our institutions and authenticity are going to be for naught.
I totally agree. He's going to go into a bit more detail. And after I let him proceed and make his comment, this is where I'm going to pause it. And we're going to go a little deeper as far as me sharing my thoughts on it.
And how do you address this, though? How do you address this?
You outlaw it.
You outlaw it?
Because it's bad for the human person.
So then what do you do with Caitlyn Jenner? You outlaw, you prevent her from being able to do the surgery?
And he even used, I'm a little disappointed with Pat just calling Caitlyn Jenner or her. Caitlyn Jenner is a man who wants to act, who's convinced that he's a woman, but he's not a woman. You would, in my opinion, you outlaw all transgender surgeries. As a Christian man who is called to love God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then love my neighbor as myself, you desire what's good for them. You desire what's right for them. And if you know that something is destructive, something that leads to an inordinate level of seeking to do harm, whether it's to others or whether it's to themselves, the ending of life of their own lives in the trans community is overwhelmingly higher than in any other community. and it's not even a debate, y'all. But somehow we've missed that mark, or these people have missed the mark, not we. Many of us already know that this is problematic, know that this isn't right. But you have so many people, especially primarily on the left, who think they should be able to do whatever. It's their right to do. It's weird because it's like the whole right to do whatever you want to do with your own body. But we live in a country where I struggle to get the health care that I desire. Like, I'm not big on taking a ton of pharmaceuticals, but in order to get any type of really unique care, even Trump had this, I think he signed in his first term, the Right to Try Act. People, you had to basically be on your deathbed with no other option in order for you to try some of these more experimental treatments. And the same people that scream a woman has a right to do with her own body will argue you down, and too many people on the right have fallen into that mindset. Oh, I don't like the idea of a child transitioning, but if you're an adult, you can do whatever you want. Why would you want to do that when the impact of their decision often isn't just them? And I get a little worked up on this. It isn't just them. Families, whether it's the mental issues they have to deal with, the psych issues, just horrendous psychological problems, the damage to relationships, the acts of violence. And the data is oftentimes suppressed. If you just do a simple Google search, you're going to have to dig deep to come up with a lot of this stuff. And I've seen people talk about it on X, like Matt Walsh. He's a very prominent figure on the right who talks about these issues, and he takes so much heat. But I thank God for people like Matt, who aren't afraid to go out and talk about the evils of this whole transgender procedures. Everything that they're doing to these people destroys lives, destroys families, and it is harmful for the individual. Drugs, a person can technically do what they want to do with their own body, but drugs are illegal. There's so many places where our individual freedoms are hindered or limited because of the potential harm it could be for other people. And there are too many examples in recent history of individuals lashing out violently. All you have to do is a simple search on X, and you'll come up with a compilation of these folks just going off in public and wanting to attack people because they got misgendered. And we're not doing them any good by sitting over here and appeasing them in their illness. None whatsoever.
You prevent you guys, your position is that you don't even allow people to do that.
It's proven to be terrible for the human person.
When was it illegal? When did it become legal?
I don't remember the year, but it obviously has, the number has intensified over the last 12 years.
Can you look it up, Rob?
He goes on to basically show that it's like,
so is it more?
There really isn't any firm date because other countries were legalizing it and people were traveling to different countries, and there was a lot of underground procedures going on, like in the 50s and 60s or around that time frame.
Is it? And again, you're not. I'm not asking you a scientist. That I'm asking. No. Hey, but I wonder how much of this is the medication they put in their bodies that makes them behave this way. That there needs to be accountability for that. To say, hey, this is what we can no longer.
And we like that idea too. One of the reasons is that we not only work in coalitions, but we often work toward an ultimate goal via incremental steps. In fact, sometimes people will call us radical incrementalists. We're willing to take a quarter of the enchilada if we can keep working there. Mm-hmm. So if that's the kind of thing that policymakers can agree on left and right, Heritage would be fully supportive of that, knowing that ultimately we have an ideal position that would be much stronger than that.
I recall in What is a Woman, Matt Walsh's, his documentary on this topic. There was a conversation where I think he went in disguise and he was talking to some of these psychologists or psychiatrists or doctors. I can't remember who this woman was, but she was speaking about pausing, quote unquote, pausing the puberty process of a young boy, young girl. And so if they decide that they want to switch genders, and if there was an issue and they didn't like the procedure, they could always continue on the process, which is garbage. It's just impossible to turn it on and off. There's nothing good. There's nothing good here. And like I said, the damage is irreversible. There are young women, grown men, grown women who cannot make babies anymore. And we're supposed to be okay with that. But largely the people who have regret they regret their transitioning, they're silenced. They're ostracized completely. And it would have to be difficult to reassimilate yourself into the mainstream society when you're a male walking around with female breasts or vice versa. It would have to be difficult. So again, there's a natural revulsion. I'm disgusted by this largely, but I need to remind myself, and not really remind myself because it's already there, but there's a level of compassion that I have for these folks. They needed real help. They primarily need to be pointed to Christ, because Christ not only came to redeem our souls, but he also came to renew our minds. And they just needed some real solid, good help. But we're in a day and age where you can do whatever you want sexually. And this is a product of that.
There is an incredible, what are you searching, Rob?
I searched the number of transgender committed violent acts increased or decreased in the last 10 years in the United States.
I'd want to know when it became legal
for the surgery.
When did it become legal to do gender reassignment surgery? There you go.
Yeah, this is where here we go.
Early 1900, not clearly illegal, but legally uncertain in early 20, and many doctors and lawyers weren't sure whether the surgery was lawful, but it involved altering healthy anatomy. Some feared it could be result as an assault under criminal law because of.
I'm sorry to stop right there, but let's consider this. You have people out there, and this is one of the primary arguments that I've heard that I always thought was a pretty solid one. Let me know what y'all think. But there are people out there who believe that they don't want their legs or don't want their arms. Or I remember seeing and hearing about a woman who wanted to be blind, so she poured Drano in her eyes. And I believe she even went to her doctor and had one of her doctors do it for her. Is that okay? Should we let people do that? Should we let people remove healthy body parts just because that's how they feel? They feel as if they want to be disabled. I think most reasonable people would say no. But yet somehow we've been convinced, and I think this is where culture comes in, where people have been convinced that this is okay, that there's nothing wrong with that. Again, as I mentioned before, what a grown person can do whatever they want to do with their own body. But I think that we can be very inconsistent with that application because we've been largely influenced by the mainstream left-leaning culture, which says that things like this are okay. You can disagree when it comes to the kids, but a grown person, there's no problem.
The uncertain Americans who wanted surgery often went overseas. A famous example is Christine Jorgensen, an American who underwent surgery in Denmark starting in 1951-52. There's going to be a ban nationwide. Interesting. So what would happen if they just said, period, you can't do it in America, full stop?
we'd become a better society because we would have fewer Americans. I mean this in sincere charity toward people suffering from gender dysphoria. We wouldn't be using physicians organizations, the financial incentive that some physicians have, which is real. We wouldn't be using federal policy to tell our fellow Americans, each of whom we love as sincerely as we love our wives and our children, that that's a good thing. A healthy society tells the hard truths in charity, even when it really does hurt. And in this case, not just because of what seems to be data pointing toward a correlation between having the surgery and acts of violence. More research needs to be done, to be clear. We know that even if those weren't happening, it's bad for the human person because social scientists have shown there is a strong correlation between that surgery and mental illness.
Did you see that?
And he's spot on right there. Completely spot on right there. And I've even heard Pat, and I love Pat Bet-David. I love his show. And I've even heard him say that mantra of, kids, no. But hey, if you're an adult, do your thing. But considering what we know, and he says there needs to be more data, more research, I agree. But I think there's plenty out there, especially when we look internationally, because I think over in Europe, a lot of these transgender surgeries have been abolished. I'm not sure if that's overall or just with kids, but they're not doing them the way we are here in the States, because their research proved that it was problematic and it was dangerous for the individual. And again, if those of us who are Christian, that the do you should never flow out of our mouths, especially when it comes to issues like this, issues where someone is in clear rebellion from God.
A $2 million lawsuit 2 weeks ago, which I think it's great.
It's helping
progress.
change policy.
Oh, no question about it, because I'm sure a lot of lawyers, when they saw that, they said, okay, hey, if your kid was forced to go through this, call us. We'd love to. The transitional wins $2 million against the New York docs who pushed up. I have a feeling we're going to see a ton of these stories over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, which is great. Doctors are going to be like, you know what? I just don't want to touch it. Nope, I'm not going to, I don't want to be caught up in this lawsuit.
You know what? Honestly, oops, I think I might have clicked something by accident. I think it's a $2 million.
When we said,
yeah, the video's done. I think $2 million, that's not even close to enough, honestly. Especially if you're a young person, or even anyone for that matter who might be older and was convinced or manipulated by a so-called health professional into doing something like that. I think as time goes on, we're going to see more and more lawsuits, and this is going to become increasingly public, which I think is good. I think it's very, very good. But $2 million, your life is forever negatively impacted. It should be way more than that. Way, way more than that. But I don't know, y'all. Again, my heart's broken for these people who are wrestling with these issues, because it's not a simple thing, and I get that. And people may look at us, and people like me who are very critical. I'm scanning while I'm talking, so forgive me here. But people may look at folks like me who are very critical of this topic, and it's not so much as the individual, it's more to do with the culture that has just said, hey, do what you want to do, and has ignored the amount of damage that this can do to people. Let's go check out some of these comments here. I've read some of the anxiety drugs they give them make them suicidal and make them think about killing people. Yeah, and I've heard that too. And with my background in the medical field, when I was in the Army, I was a EMT and combat medic. But then also when I started working in the prison and in the jail and patrolling the streets, you come in contact with a ton of people who are dealing with psychiatric issues. And then you start becoming more familiar with effects of certain drugs and stuff like that. And I'm not even claiming to be any kind of an expert, but a lot of these drugs, if you start reading the packages and you start reading the side effects, psychosis, suicidal tendencies, they're very real. It is a very real thing. You'll be surprised how many transgender people on anxiety medication. Oh yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. But yeah, I think most folks would be. And that shows that there are deeper issues going on, just as I said earlier. There is a growing number of trans detransitioning. They realize mutilating themselves doesn't change how they feel, right? Cutting off healthy body parts, replacing them with all kinds of other fake body parts. And you're still dealing with these. Some are dealing with tendencies to want to end their own lives, all types of other issues. It's not a fix. It is not a fix. And I can't say it enough. My heart really breaks for a lot of these folks. Pharmaceutical industries are covering up their side effects, the side effects of their drugs, which they do all the time. And they get away with it time and time again. I even think it was Ronald Reagan who signed in a lot of these protections for these pharmaceutical companies, for the FDA. You're basically covered. And I think that if they got rid of that, that would force their hand and force them to be more careful when they're manufacturing these drugs. Most of them commit suicide when they regret their actions. Yeah, it's a lot. It's very rampant. I think somewhere over like in Amsterdam, which has a very far more progressive society than we have, even their data shows that the rate of self-harm amongst this community is inordinate. It's not normal. Romans 1 is playing out right in front of us. Amen to that, brother. Sadly. And Don, I'm with you. It's horrific. That's the only way to explain it. Just when you just hear this conversation, I mean, I don't know, y'all. I can go on and on this topic. I know I'm not done with this topic in particular because there's so much to discuss, and I'll definitely be doing a follow-up video. But here I want to go into a different topic. There's no smooth transition, no pun intended, from this topic. But I want to go into something, excuse me, y'all. I want to go into something a bit more lighthearted. Maybe it's probably on the same level, to be honest with you, for those of us who are Christ followers and who have really wrestled with the issues of the aliens, the supernatural, all this kind of stuff. I know this is an ongoing conversation. But recently, Barack Obama, during a podcast interview or some kind of interview, was asked about the UFO phenomenon. And this is what he had to say. He did try to walk it back later on, but this is what he said initially.
Intermittent fasting study. So with 39% of the vote, you voted for aliens are real. So we're going to talk about it. Former President Obama going viral for his comments on extraterrestrial encounters. In an interview with Brian Tyler Cohen over the weekend, the former president got some attention when he proclaimed that aliens are real.
They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in what is it?
Area 51.
Area 51. There's no underground facility, unless there's this enormous conspiracy, and they hid it from the president of the United States.
Which wouldn't be shocking at all, honestly. CIA, other organizations that we may never know about or have never heard about. All we have to do is look at Trump's administration. There were all types of covert and secret things going on behind his back. So I think there's some things that there's some levels of government that even our presidents are completely unaware of. And the idea that there are beings extra dimensional beings, which I believe they are, we are dealing with supernatural entities. And that's not just me talking. And I'm just a layman. I'm not even close to an expert on this topic. But there are people who are self-professed or professing, or they're seen to be, they're looked on as experts who believe that the things that we're dealing with aren't just beings that exist on different planets. There are many people, and it is a popular perspective that many of these beings that we're seeing are interdimensional beings because they do things that a physical body cannot do. Appearing, disappearing, walking through walls, disappearing in thin air. There's some really wild conversations. And if you want to dig a little deeper into this topic, I did an interview a few years ago with a UFO expert. His name is Gary Bates from Creation Ministries International. He's written books on the topic. And he and I sat down and we had like at least an hour conversation. Very, very fascinating. Make sure you check that out on Code Red Conversations on my YouTube channel. Fascinating conversation with Gary Bates, a UFO expert.
Okay, so he is clearing things up, saying in a post on Instagram that, quote, statistically, the universe is so vast that the odds are good there's life out there somewhere. But the distances between solar systems are so great that the chances we've been visited by aliens is low. Astrophysicist and ABC News contributor Hakeem Oluseyi
back there real quick. He said, and I saw no evidence during my presidency that extraterrestrials have made contact with us, really. But he clearly said they exist. So, but he saw no evidence? I don't know. Not that Obama's the most trustworthy guy in the world. So, and I know that there's some things you're not allowed to talk about, discuss openly, but we're getting more and more information out there discussing the belief in extraterrestrials, unidentified, what they call them, UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. You're seeing more, we're hearing more and more testimonies. So it's getting out there in the mainstream significantly more.
Low. Astrophysicist and ABC News contributor Hakeem Oluseyi joins us now for more. Hakeem, it is great to see you. When I first heard about this story, I thought we need to talk to a physicist about this. And there you are. Our booking team was on it. Okay, so the former president clarifying what he meant, but still suggesting there could be life out there. What would it take for scientists to confirm alien life?
Well, as I always say, the easiest confirmation of aliens show up and say, hi, here we are, right? But that's unlikely to happen. The reason why is because, when you talk about alien life, there's different levels to it. The conditions that are necessary on a planet to give you microbial life is likely widespread. It's probably also within our solar system. And there's evidence of that now on Mars. Then there's the possibility of multicellular life like we have here, which happened, 600 million years ago on Earth with the Ediacaran and the Cambrian explosion. You ended up with multicellular life.
Yeah, I'm a biblical creationist through and through. So when we talk about these massive time scales, you're already losing me. But the evolutionists, most of them, will hold on dogmatically to long ages, long periods of time, because you have to have that in order for the concept of evolution to even be considered. But even the most honest ones, the most honest of these evolutionists will tell you that the hundreds of millions or even hundreds of billions of years is not long enough for a life to spontaneously develop on its own. Because apart from God, that some form of evolution is the only game in town, y'all, because you have to have a naturalistic explanation for that. So they hold on and they clutch these long ages with all their might, because once that it becomes a non-factor, or if it ever does, and we ever get back to a more biblical perspective when it comes to our origins, this will always be something that they hold to.
But getting to intelligence and technologically advanced civilizations, that is a completely other matter. I wouldn't be surprised if, even though I think the first two are incredibly likely, and I've done calculations that suggest that, the last one is nearly impossible, right? And so the chances that aliens have visited us is slim to none in my estimation.
So when scientists talk about alien life, break this down for us. What do they actually mean?
Well, at the very minimum, it's microbial life. Like the just making that first step of a replicating, self-contained organic matter, chemical process is such a leap that if you get that, then everything else becomes possible. And what we see here on Earth is that it occurred very early in Earth's history.
But see, we don't actually see that here on Earth. That is the assumption. That's the assumption. You can't see that because the period is so long, and there are many assumptions in order to get there. But if you come to this argument with a naturalistic perspective, a natural origin is the only game in town, as I mentioned before.
And now we have evidence on Mars. We see these long chain alkanes, these organic molecules that have been, reduced by radiation over millions of years, over hundreds of millions of years, and yet they're still there. That tells us that their abundance was even greater in the past. So, the evidence for microbial life is probably widespread, but the evidence for a technologically advanced civilization, which is what people think when we say aliens, that's the one that isn't likely.
And even when he talks about this microbial, I really want to know what he means when he talks about microbial life evidence on Mars, because I think if there really was some deep evidence of life on Mars, that that would be everywhere. I'm talking about life. Even the simplest cell, the leap of the amount of information from a genetic standpoint, the DNA, even he admitted this to some degree. It is so complex, and it has never been observed. And statistically, it's impossible. Statistically. Now, they'll say, like it's a 10 with 10,000 zeros behind it, because they don't ever want to say something is impossible. But naturalism, I'm telling you, it is a dead end. And a lot of people really wrestle with that. But the evolutionists, they'll always argue for it to be the case. So I want to encourage most of us, anyone out there who's listening, who's interested in the topic, check out organizations like, I think it's the Discovery Institute, where Stephen Meyer, he's a intelligent design advocate. But I would even go further. Groups like CMI at creation.com, Creation Ministries International, they have many high-level chemists who are biblical creationists, and groups like Institute of Creation Research, Answers in Genesis, they discuss these issues. And not only do they discuss them from a biblical perspective, which is the most important conversation to have, but they also address the impossibility of life coming about on its own through natural processes from a scientific perspective. Great stuff, great conversation. But I want to thank all y'all for joining me today. Stay tuned. I should be seeing y'all again on Thursday. Again, we could talk about a lot of these issues all day long. But when it's all said and done, folks, with all the stuff that's coming out when it comes to the Epstein files and the violence happening all over the place and the so-called UFO sightings, it really makes me sit back and wonder, are we approaching the end times? And I'm sure people have been saying that time and time again over the centuries, but I can't help but wonder. But I'm not going to rattle my brain over it. I'm going to do the best I can to be prepared for when the Lord returns. I want to do the best I can to shout him from the rooftops to the world. And I pray if anyone's watching me right now who doesn't know Christ, I pray that you would seek him with all your heart. You would just pray that the Lord will reveal himself to you, that you would come to an understanding that you are an enemy of God based due to your sin, and that apart from the placing your faith in Jesus Christ, we all will stand before God lost and condemned. And God, in his great mercy and his great love for us, he came down and gave his life in the person of Jesus Christ as a eternal sacrifice for the sins of mankind. And the only way to be right with God is by faith in Jesus Christ. So I pray that you will repent, you would turn from your sin and trust him as I did a long time ago. I'm not sitting over here trying to act like I'm better than anybody. I know that I'm a sinner at my heart, but I've been redeemed and transformed, and I've been made a saint by what Christ did on the cross. And by me placing my faith in who he is and the work that he did, because none of my works would ever be good enough to bridge that gap that my sin caused. So I love y'all. Thanks for joining me. And as always, stay safe. God bless. And make sure you join the conversation. Take care, y'all.